Welcome to the Tech 45 podcast. I'm your host, Jack Ryan, where we discuss all things human machine interface, especially in the sectors of aviation, aerospace, unmanned systems, software, manufacturing, and what other topics the experts in the field want to talk about. I really enjoyed this interview with Tim Busse. It's a masterclass in recruiting top talent, especially in the high tech field, in a highly competitive job environment. Um, I hope you'll enjoy this interview, and I learned a lot from Tim on how you recruit top talent that not only has the required skill set, leadership abilities, but also the right cultural fit for your organization. Tim, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me, Jack. My name's Tim Busse. I've been in technical talent acquisition for almost 10 years now, most recently with one of the largest tech companies in the space that I'm sure you all have heard of. And I'm excited to be here and talk shop with you.
No, excellent. I think, you and I were talking right before we started recording, and, one of the objectives that I want to, meet is really, I want people in our network, both of our networks, to understand, how difficult it is to recruit top talent,
Sure.
specific to, highly skilled, highly specific engineering roles, and those related to technology that's ever changing. So that's
Sure.
one of the things I want to talk to you about.
Sounds good. I'm ready.
So I guess, one of the themes of the podcast, I mean, its theme is human machine interface. And a lot
Sure.
of the recent videos I've done is on hardware. So, we were going to interview truck drivers, pilots, people that, operate spacecraft. I'm going to do videos on
Hmm.
that. But really, all hardware nowadays is all software enabled.
Sure.
So, the user interface, the graphical user interface, and the way we interact with these machines and these PCs, these computers, these MacBooks, there's an underlying interface that's so critical and
Yeah.
so critical to the human machine interface. Could you tell me about like your earliest memory interacting with any machine that was
Yeah.
impactful for you?
Yeah, so when you bring that up, the first thing that comes to mind was when my dad purchased uh, gosh, I don't even know. It was capable of operating Windows, but it also ran DOS.
Yep.
And
Yep.
we had I think like most people that grew up in the 80s or the 90s, we had a whole room dedicated to our computer room, right? And I just remember being taken back by it. I had never really been around a computer before. We had a couple in the elementary school that I was at, but
Same.
those we weren't allowed to touch those because we could break them. But really, being able to just do simple things like play learning games on there just had me fascinated. So I spent more time in that computer room, if you will, than probably anywhere else in the house. And it's funny thinking back. I can't code a program now, but I learned really quickly how to run programs on MS DOS. And looking back, I'm kind of ashamed. I probably ran it better when I was 5 or 6 years old than I do now. So that's really kind of what I would say struck my love for computers and machines, and sort of letting getting on those and figuring it out myself, and finding out what all the possibilities are there. So that would be my earliest memory for sure.
Man, that brings back memories for me. I haven't thought about this in probably a decade. I think the first time I typed on a keyboard on a desktop PC, like you're describing, I think
Yeah.
my neighbor had just installed Microsoft Word. I don't even know if this is Microsoft Word 95 or something,
So
96.
yeah, some version of it.
Yeah, one of the original ones, and then it slowly evolved to where you had this this little icon of a what is it? What it was a character that was in the shape of a paperclip. I don't know if you remember this
Oh yeah,
guy.
yeah. He was your little desktop assistant.
Desktop assistant. And I thought that was the coolest thing. And I'll
Yeah.
never forget. I mean, my parents were my mom was kind of slow to adopt technology. And when we got our first laptop that was internet enabled, I remember
Yeah.
having to do DOS commands. We had to have a family friend come over and show us how to do
Yeah.
the DOS commands. And I remember running Oregon Trail was my favorite game. I
Oh yeah.
loved. Yeah, did you play that?
Oh yeah. We
Uh,
I think the first time we played Oregon Trail would have been on one of those school gosh, I think it was maybe a Mac 2 or maybe it was a PC, but
yeah,
we would have, I don't know, maybe a Friday where we got to play on the computer, and we played Oregon Trail, and I'm certain that I ran home and bugged my parents until they got it, and that was, I think that was sort of the first game that really kind of pulled me in. There were some other, kids games where you would solve basic problems to advance in the game. But Oregon Trail was really like, sort of the first video game, and spent countless hours on that for sure.
yeah. I spent way too many hours on that game, and I still think about it. I think about all the decisions you had to make. How are you going to cross the stream? Are you going to ford the stream? Are you going to try to drive
Yeah.
through it? You run into different conflicts that you have to. I guess it was like one of the original RPGs. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, and it's funny how it's sort of become a meme for sort of the millennial generation, how we all had this shared experience, even though obviously it wasn't an online game. But I think you talk to anybody who's, call it, I don't know, 30 to 50, and they have some memory of playing Oregon Trail. So it's one of those cool early shared experiences that I think most of us have.
It's so funny, and yeah, I loved Oregon Trail, just like you're describing. I think it's amazing. One of the things that as the computers evolved, and I was always into these kind of like RPG style games where you were adventuring through some sort of either fictional or real world scenario.
Sure.
And and then I kind of moved on to the strategy games. My favorite game in the world to this day, and I still love this game. I still have it on my laptop. Is StarCraft 2. That was
Okay.
a game that, yeah, it was the first time I interacted with peers from my middle school. Is really my during my middle school days, where we could chat and then play collaboratively through this
Yeah.
graphical user interface. And I just love the detail and all the thought that went into the spaceships that you can control. These tanks, and you had to build this base and collect resources. I'm like really nerding out on StarCraft right now, so that's not why I wanted to talk to you. But it's a good memory for me, and that's, I don't know, communicating with people through a computer is a critical skill. And I've often heard that in the near future, those that are not, you know not experts, but those that are not well versed in using a PC or a Mac, it'll be seen as a form of illiteracy in the
Yeah,
future.
it absolutely is. It absolutely is, and it's funny, not to get too far off topic, but I have friends that have young kids, and they, probably all of them have iPads, and to see them operate an iPad when they're 3 years old versus
It's wild.
what I was doing when I was three is pretty wild. So that technical literacy is not going away. It's only gonna, it's sort of hitting that exponential curve. So it's something you have to have, or you're gonna get left behind.
Yeah, that was a theme in the last interview I did. So the last interview I did was highly focused on ground vehicles, both in the military and the commercial space. And we talked about that. I think those that are able to harness technology to their advantage will be very successful in the future. I think that's just the reality that we're in. And I don't know how far that expands, but one of the things that I've seen, just watching a lot of recruiters and HR managers at work like yourself, I
Yeah,
saw you do this firsthand because you recruited me,
I
and you
did.
used a variety of technology tools to recruit me to what I thought was an engineering services firm that, and this job opportunity really changed my life. I don't know if I've ever shared that with you, but
Wow,
the job that you recruited me to, and even though it was a sales focused job, it totally changed my perspective regarding how products and software are developed, and just
sure.
how detailed it can be, and how really good product development looks like.
Hmm.
The company was just amazing at that. And so, one of the things I wanted to ask you in the interview, and I think would be super valuable for companies out there that are either trying to grow their staff or grow into a new market that requires new skill sets from their engineers. How
Yeah.
have you used technology successfully to recruit top talent in the high tech space?
Yeah, so great question. It's hard to say that there's not one solution that fits for everything, and I think without going too deep into the weeds about sort of recruiting processes and recruiting approaches, but it starts with sort of alignment between what the hiring manager or what the needs of the business are, and really creating that alignment um, between the company, between the recruiter, and between what you're looking for. So it really starts with that. If you search recruiting tools you go on Google and look for a recruiting tool, you're going to get 10,000 different results, and any one of them could work. LinkedIn Recruiter, is a great tool.
Sure.
It's, in my opinion, got by far the biggest sort of professional talent pool,
Yep.
and is great. Every sort of applicant tracking system or applicant database that a company has is a really underutilized tool. So those are two great places to start, and sort of what I leverage first and foremost when I'm working on something new. Um, obviously LinkedIn, because of the volume of people that are on there, and the search functions, and the ability to find people is pretty strong. But I think probably the most underutilized tool is sort of that internal database or that internal network, because those folks already at least know of your company and know a little bit about you, and there's already sort of an established relationship. So the development of the tools that exist, or the tools that will exist, it's really dependent on what you're looking for. There's so many of them, and they're still pretty early on in sort of the development in machine learning and AI. But there's already some really good tools out there, and again, it's going to be specific to what you're looking for. But those are sort of the two that I've leaned on, and I think how I found you.
Yeah, it was LinkedIn for sure. Yeah, we connected via LinkedIn, and with a very very quick, succinct follow up phone call that I got from you.
Yeah,
I got an unknown number from a Denver area code and it was
yep,
you. It was Tim. It was Tim. So I want to go. We'll talk on that real quick because I think
sure,
what you did such a good job explaining the role and explaining not only the requirements, the job requirements, but
sure.
also what was expected. I think, and I think you're right. The tools are oftentimes underutilized, but I think from
Hmm.
a recruiting perspective, and how you use the tools to find the applicant that looked good on paper,
Sure,
this is the critical part. You did such a good job at coming across because you were my first impression of the company.
sure,
You did such a good job coming across as someone who is genuine, honest, and straight to the point. And that's something that is not common within the recruiting world. I think recruiters, I don't know what metrics they're often tracked by, but it seems to be
sure,
kind of a volume game. And I'm shocked at how many recruiters reach out to me that either want to hire them for their services, or it doesn't happen that often, but people are trying to recruit me to another company, and they don't really
sure,
know what the role requires.
sure.
And something you said when I want to ask you about, how did you build the relationships with those engineering directors, those VPs, those stakeholders that were looking to hire people? How did you know exactly what they wanted?
Yeah, it's really simple, and like you mentioned, unfortunately, it's oftentimes overlooked, but it's uh, spending the time to get to know them, and it's not just sitting down with a piece of paper and saying, "Hey, what three things do you need for this role?" It's not just a one-time meeting. It's sitting in on interviews with them, and observing and working with their team, even when you're not, working on a brand new role, and really understanding that culture within the team, and having transparent conversations when they're talking to you about what they need, and more often than not they need it yesterday, and being able to sort of set those ground rules, or that framework for what this is going to look like. And then it's just spending time talking to people, talking to potential candidates and being transparent with them. And it is some trial and error where, after I meet with the hiring manager and do all those things we talked about, it's, putting people in front of them and taking and giving feedback and helping them understand what the market is, and really just making sure that there's that aligned relationship. Um, and then, on the candidate side, and making them feel comfortable and being transparent, it really, what it all comes back to is remembering what it's like when you're a candidate. If you're working at a great company like we were, you have a lot to sell, but you need to make sure that there's that alignment. And they're probably very psyched about the job, or coming to work for the company. So setting those sort of initial expectations and having clear upfront conversations is not as easy as it seems sometimes, but that's what works in the end. And that level of transparency and being honest and open with people is going to sort of set the foundation for that relationship, even if it doesn't work out. You can't, you're not going to be successful, and the candidate's not going to have a great experience unless you do those things.
I couldn't agree more. There's three words that I want to pull out of that
Sure.
amazing explanation: honesty, transparency, empathy. You didn't
Yep.
exactly say empathy, but putting yourself in the
Huge part
candidate's
of.
shoes. Um, Nobody likes to be left in the dark. People
Yep.
like to remain updated through the hiring process.
Yep.
Whether it be, and this is true for not only external roles, you're going to a new organization, but this is also true for internal roles. I had
Absolutely.
experiences in the past where I didn't feel like I was being supported by the person that I was under, and I was it was when I was trying to grow my career within the organization. It was a long time ago, and
Yeah.
that's critical. I always make a concerted effort to, if there's whether it be my peers or it's colleagues I have the privilege of leading, um, growing their career is critical. It's
Hmm.
one of the things I enjoy the most. And if I'm not passing along valuable skill sets to them, and helping them grow their career, and
Hmm.
give them new skill sets that are valuable in the workplace. I think Richard Branson said that he wants to give his people all these awesome skill sets. I'm paraphrasing, and he wants to give them everything and treat them like gold with the hopes that they stay. So you want to build up skill sets within your internal staff, which in turn would make them marketable to an external organization. But you want to treat them so well that they stay. Um,
Absolutely.
and and the other thing I want to just kind of dive into, because this is something that is very uncommon within some of the recruiters and HR managers that I've worked with in the past, is that building relationships with those directors and those VPs like you did.
Hmm.
Um, I feel like you were intentional about setting regular meetings with them,
Yeah.
even if it was unrelated to a specific candidate or a group of candidates or job role. You made a point to build relationships with them, regardless of what the topics were.
Yeah.
I feel like that built trust. I don't know what was the outcome of that from your perspective.
Yeah. So it was really sort of I don't want to be cliched, but it's sort of an open door policy. So we would have, scheduled, planned sort of office hours, that were, I highly recommended they come to, because that's where stuff got done.
Sure.
And then if I had a question, I would make time for them, or I would ask them, when can I come sit with you for 15 minutes so I can, I'm having a hard time finding this person, or finding this particular skill set. When do you have 10 or 15 minutes for me to talk through this? And we would solve for whatever we needed to solve for, and then we would just talk about anything. And I wouldn't say that I became friends with them, but it was very much a trust built relationship where, we weren't. I wasn't just bugging them to get something from them. I was providing value to them. So if I needed something from them, I would come prepared with an update on the market, or where we're at with X, Y, and Z. And all these other candidates that maybe we're on a longer term process with, but they're getting something out of it. And, that was sort of my approach, and has always been my approach, and it hasn't steered me wrong yet. So,
Yeah.
always looking to adapt it to be as strong as it can be, but that's worked well so far.
I don't intend to contradict you, but I think that you were building friendships from what I saw.
Sure.
So and I don't want to, contradict what you
Not with
said,
everybody,
but
but
not.
but with most of them.
I think you were very well regarded, and I considered you a friend right off the bat. I
Yeah.
think you were one of the key reasons why I got so excited about the role that you were recruiting for.
Yeah.
And that's I mean that. So, and I think when we worked together, we were looking at a variety of really um, diverse skill sets. So I guess that's the other thing I wanted to ask you about is, some companies are hyper focused on manufacturing or building products that are made of metal, and
Sure.
they're highly mechanical in nature. Some companies only build electronics. Some companies
Sure.
are hyper focused on optical sensors, and they have a bunch of optical engineers. How
Sure.
did you recruit for such a wide variety of skill sets that were all highly technical for the most part?
Yeah. So so the great companies that I've worked at had a very distinct understanding of what does this person need to show up with on day one, and what can this person learn or be taught or adapt to. And that the best companies that I've worked at have had a really kind of keen sense of that, and that made it easy because anyone can go and search for a mechanical engineer that's worked on propulsion systems and find
Yep,
1,000 a thousand kind of initially qualified candidates, right? But it's understanding that there's more than likely not gonna be a perfect fit for this role. So if there's not, what is sort of the core baseline skill set that we need to have? What can be taught? What can be learned? And beyond that, what are the immeasurable things that make someone a good fit for what we're trying to do? And I think to sort of pat myself on the back is I have a very good understanding of sort of what those things are. Or I work really hard to get a great understanding of sort of those immeasurable things, because
agreed.
that
Yeah.
that makes the difference between an okay hire and a good hire and a great hire, so on and so forth. So um, I think that's sort of a gap for a lot of companies is they will look at a job description for the person they hired in this role before and say, "Hey, we need someone who meets all of these things." Well, do you really? And understanding sort of what can be fostered and what has to show up on day one.
Yeah, well said. I think, the ability to hire someone that's teachable and maybe has,
Hmm.
three out of the four, core skill sets that the hiring manager is looking for. But, I guess what I'm curious too is I'm super curious about this. How do you recognize those intangibles that you really can't put on a resume? And how do you recognize that whether or not that person is going to be a good cultural fit for the company and
Yeah,
the role?
yeah. So it starts with sort of that initial conversation, that initial 30 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever it is that I have with someone. And what I'm really gauging for as a recruiter is what motivates them. What are those intrinsic things that get them excited? And I'll try to ask those, frame the conversation and ask those questions in a way that it doesn't feel like they're being interviewed. I want to really dig in and understand what's important to them. And, I can use that information to sort of cross check and see if there's alignment between sort of the mission of the company, the culture of the team, the culture of the company. So it's not that I'm being disingenuous, but I'm sort of on a fact finding mission without letting them know that I'm on a fact finding mission to find out what's important to them and what they're looking for. And my hope is that it doesn't feel inauthentic or I want it to feel as little like an interview as possible. And I think really kind of using those skills or trying to hone in on that is really important in sort of finding out, sort of breaking through that, sort of interview face or that interview voice, and I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle, and how you find out what's important to this person beyond I'm just looking for a job. So that's primarily my focus in that initial 20 or 30 minutes when I'm chatting with someone.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. When you were a young recruiter, let's say your first 2 years as a
Yeah.
recruiter, was it difficult for you to find that alignment?
It was. So to kind of give some context and some history, like many recruiters out there, I got my start in agency.
Mhm.
And for those who don't know, agency is where you're basically a recruiter that doesn't work for the company that's hiring. You're working for multiple companies on multiple different roles, and you're talking to a lot of people, and you're trying to fill a lot of different roles. The biggest challenge, I think, if you ask any recruiter who spent time in agency, is there's a disconnect or a gap often um, between the company that's hiring and the work that you're trying to do for them. So you're trying to find out what it is they really want, and that can be challenging because you don't have that direct line to a hiring manager. You can't necessarily go spend 10 minutes and sit with them. So it's really challenging, but my time in agency, I think, taught me a lot because you're talking to probably 25 to 30 people a day about different roles, and some of them want to talk to you, some of them don't want to talk to you. They're happy with where they're at in their career, but learning to have those tough conversations, learning how to ask questions and talk to someone that doesn't want to talk to you was incredibly valuable, and sort of learning some of those fundamentals that I think have carried with me throughout my career.
Yeah, that's amazing hearing and I love hearing about your experience working at a recruiting agency because you've
Yeah,
talked a lot about the experience when you and I would go out to lunch and go, on our lunch
yeah,
break. And I always found it fascinating. I mean, some of these recruiting agencies are highly successful. I mean,
yeah,
there's not a ton of overhead depending on how they're set up,
sure.
um, as far as like capital expenses. But one
Hmm.
of the things that is critical, I think, early on, and anybody that wants to do a a sales or recruiting career, is the volume and the amount of reps that you probably got at the agency
Yes.
was probably sets you on a pretty good path for success in your career. Just the amount of repetitions that you went through.
It absolutely did. It absolutely did. And having been in talent acquisition and recruiting for as long as I have, there's I've met good recruiters that never did agency, but I would say most of the stronger ones that I've worked with have gotten those reps. And when you're not afraid to pick up the phone and dial, then that's I'm sure that applies to sales. Uh, there's something that's built once you've done that enough that you learn how to talk to people, and you learn how to phrase things and ask questions, and hopefully get what you want. But I
Yeah.
don't think there's much that can replace those reps that you get even with just a year or two in the agency world.
I think you couldn't be more correct. I think the thousands and thousands of cold calls that I made as an entry level salesperson.
Yeah,
The first job I took out of the army when I was like off into the civilian world was a entry level sales role. I was as me and a bunch of other post college kids,
sure.
and it's very very uncomfortable. And it's like it's one thing to send an email to a stranger. It's you can come up with a well crafted email, but to actually pick up the phone and dial that person, and then they answer. You're like I was like
Yeah,
I was like praying. I got a voicemail. Like, yeah, I know what to do. If I get a voicemail, I got a pretty good
sure.
crafted voicemail. But they answer the phone and they're wondering why you're calling. It's a number they
Yep.
don't recognize. And you have to ask questions. This is something I was terrible at as a young salesperson. And you have to figure out what questions to ask within 15 seconds of them picking up the phone, that might pique their interest or, allow you to have an opportunity for follow on conversation.
Yeah, and it's sort of the art of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? And being comfortable with sort of those awkward silences or those awkward pauses.
Yeah.
And I don't know of any other way to do that other than sort of that smile and dial approach. Um, and I think it's an incredibly valuable skill.
No, I think you're right. I think, it certainly helped me. in my sales career. I certainly wasn't a natural salesperson by any means. I know people that are, they just have it. But the repetitions, going on sales calls with my directors over and over and
Hmm.
over again. We went on so many sales calls in person, on Teams, on Zoom, whatever I think we had Skype, at my first company, we still
Oh,
had Skype for
yeah,
business or whatever it was. Yeah. The repetitions are critical. And I always encourage people that are trying to learn a new skill or go into a new job field that's unrelated to what they've done before, get as many repetitions as you can. And I had a friend reach out to me recently, who messaged me. He said he's looking at post careers after the army.
yeah,
Yeah, so he's getting out of the army probably the next 4 years, and he asked me, but what should he study to sum up for the civilian world? And I said, well, what are you interested in? And he gave me a couple of different areas of expertise that he was looking to get into. I said, "What gets you the most excited?" And he's like, "Well, I want something that's gonna get me a job." Understandable. And he said, "The second one is I want something that's gonna be comfortable." And I had to be really honest with him. I said, "I
yeah.
don't think that's what you want. I think comfort is there's not really anything at the end of that. I mean, being comfortable means that you're not really growing professionally or maybe even as a human being. So what you said, being comfortable with being uncomfortable, I don't think there's any other path to growth."
No, and that's interesting. I think you can get to a spot where you're comfortable, but you're that's just comfort in being uncomfortable, right? It's um it's learning how to deal with that and learning how to have the skills where you deal with those tough situations. So there's nothing that you're never gonna get to that end point or that, and it's not even an end point, but you're not going to get to that sort of mastery or work toward that mastery if you're not uncomfortable for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to give another anecdote. You came across when you called me from that unknown Denver area code.
Yeah,
You came across as a very dialed recruiter who knew what questions to ask. You were transparent. It seemed like you'd done this thousands of times, which is probably the case.
yeah, yeah. It's funny. I was thinking when we were talking a little bit earlier about how many times I hung up the phone and thought to put my head in my hands and thought to myself, what did I just say to that person, or
Oh
how
gosh.
stupid did I just sound?
Yes,
And
yes.
you have to go through those times, and um, you have to be sort of reflective or self-aware, and uh, you know sort of evaluate yourself, um, as often as you can, and as you do that, you're going to sort of build that muscle and sharpen those tools to where you can kind of catch yourself in the middle of maybe saying something that you don't mean, you shouldn't, whatever, or you're not trying to say, but it's sharpening those skills and building that sort of that mental muscle, and focusing on it. It's something that has to have your attention. And then then it's sort of like riding a bike. Once you get comfortable and you build up that muscle or that callus, however you want to phrase it, but really important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The most embarrassing story I have as a young salesperson was I had emailed and called this guy who we were trying to upsell to another product in our
Yeah.
portfolio, and he had he was an existing customer, right? So he already had a product that um, was one of ours. So we were trying to upsell him, not directly, but make sure he's aware of all the new products that are out there.
Yeah.
And I sent an email to him saying, "Hey, I want to, get to know you, and maybe we can grab coffee sometime." It came across, well, I thought it came across or would have come across as a benign email introduction from one of the new reps in the
Sure.
territory. And he actually, no, it didn't come across well at all. He emailed my director and my VP saying, "Don't ever allow this rep to contact me again.
Wow.
Is this?" And then he went on to say, "Is this how you train your new reps? This is embarrassing and unprofessional." And
Wow.
so it kind of went up the chain of command, probably to my VP. Hopefully, it didn't go any higher than that. But and
Sure.
then back down to me, and I was crushed. And I remember, I'll never forget this. Luckily, I had a director I was working with back then who was amazing. I still love this guy to this day. He's also a veteran. He's a former Marine Corps guy. And he said, don't worry about that. You know what? He used some choice words. He
Yeah.
said, don't worry about what he has to say. Mistakes happen, misunderstandings happen over email. Just keep doing what you're doing. And
Yeah.
I guess one of the topics I wanted to talk to you about is, what leaders have you had in your career? You don't have to name them specifically, but what leadership
Sure.
qualities have impacted you and made you so good at what you do? I mean, because I know somebody took you under their wing or something at some point.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, in the agency world, I worked for a really small agency. It was about 12 people, if I remember correctly. They were all um, super talented recruiting and sales folks, and I would have to give my credit to the team there and my boss there. Just really outstanding recruiters who understood not only the agency side of it, but sort of the whole of calling people and talking to them about a job and understanding, what it's like to be rejected, what it's like to have a deal that you think is signed, sealed, delivered, and something happens. Something always happens.
Yep.
So I was really lucky to be surrounded by 10 or 12 people that it was like an all-star team, and they
Cool.
went on to do some really great things, start their own companies, work at some really impressive companies, and sort of climb the ladder there. So I would attribute all a lot of my success to just getting the chance to work with some really incredible recruiters and sales folks um, who understood it and worked really hard at it. And I think that was sort of the takeaway that so what you get told no, like figure out what you can do better and keep going. And just a really incredible team there. I've had some incredible mentors at every stop. Most recently, I was that was incredible. Getting the chance to work with and learn from some of the people who have what I consider reached sort of the top of the profession. And my leaders there, I'm still. I'm still friends with them. I still talk to them. I'm still learning from them, and just getting the chance to observe and sort of see how they think and how they approach business, how they approach building a culture. Um, those I would say those things more than anything else. I feel like by the time I was there, I sort of had an understanding of what my mechanics were as far as recruiting, but
Yep.
really getting exposure to what a good company looks like and how to build a powerful, trustful, high performing team was incredible. So I couldn't narrow it down to probably three or four. It would be much more than that, but really sort of taking something from each stop and um, observing sort of those things that I saw that worked, and also what I saw that didn't work. Really try to take something from each stop and sort of build on that foundation that I built early on.
Yeah, I think it's really important to emulate the best qualities of the leaders that you had the privilege to work under. I was really fortunate. I had some incredible leaders that I worked under in the Army, and then after the Army, as I was trying to, struggling through my initial sales career. And I think I would describe my sales team that I worked on after I got out of the Army. It was a group of 12 people, I think, give or
Hmm.
take one or two, and they were an all-star team. I mean, they're all-stars. So I felt
Yeah,
like I still feel this way. I felt like I was learning from the best. And
absolutely.
and they've really, and I was lucky we had like 3 or 4 veterans on our team that had all served in different combat deployments too. And so they understood like how difficult it was for me to switch gears. In the military, you're kind of indoctrinated in this like, very rigid structure, and like your career path
Yeah,
is like basically carved in stone, if especially if you're an officer in the military. It's like you kind of know exactly what the next step is, which is comfortable. It did feel comfortable. I was doing well in the army,
sure.
and to be completely ripped from that, and then to put into, I was working a remote field sales job. They gave me like a week of training back then, and they gave me a
Yep.
laptop, an iPhone, and a Salesforce account and said, all right, go to work.
Yeah,
But I was, but it was really that it was like that. But I had a few directors that really went out of their way to take me under their wing, mentor me,
yeah.
and then help me learn from my own mistakes. And oh man, thinking back on that makes me really feel grateful. So,
Absolutely. And it's funny, a lot of time you don't know that you're building those relationships or those skills while they're happening. And it's until you've sort of experienced success or sort of career progression for yourself that you look back and realize, man, I had the opportunity to learn from some of the best as I was
oh,
building my foundation or as I was sort of figuring out what my career or my career progression was going to look like. And you look back and it's important. And I was not in the military, but having experience playing, competitive high school sports, you learn how to understand your strengths and your weaknesses, and how to lean on other people and leverage those weaknesses or those strengths. Um, I think that's sort of an underrated, uh, under focused on sort of aspect of things is, can do you have that self awareness to know what your weaknesses are? Are you comfortable, you know, discussing those or realizing those, and being comfortable leaning on the people around you to either help build that muscle, or, if I'm not naturally a math guy, being comfortable working with people who can uh, sort of meet that weakness and supplement it. So it's it's definitely more art than science, I would say.
yeah, it is. And high school sports, like you mentioned, shaped my entire life.
Absolutely.
2 weeks ago, I wrote a letter to my freshman high school football coach. We had a freshman
Oh,
team and
wow.
then JV and then
Yep.
varsity.
Yep.
And I'd been wanting to write him on this letter for years. And I was I don't know if I was just too nervous or just caught up with other things. But his
I
name
don't
is
think you're
Coach.
ever not nervous around your high school coach. I'm sure
Oh,
if
okay.
I
I'm
talk to
glad
mine right
that makes
now,
sense. Okay.
I'm sure if I talk to mine right now, I mean, I love the guy, respected him, but if he walked in the room, I'd straighten up, and I would be, I guess, nervous.
Yeah, that's how I felt. So I'm okay. I'm so glad I'm not the only one that feels that way because I was like, I shouldn't be nervous around him. I'm an adult, I haven't, he hasn't blown the whistle on me
Yeah,
in like 50, I don't know, 20 years. So
yeah,
I wrote him a letter because one of the things that I've really been trying to make a concerted effort about, um, is expressing gratitude, not only to yourself, we're so lucky to live in this country and to
yeah,
have access to all the amenity, to all, just I love this country so much. The United States is just a beacon for hope and freedom in the world. I really believe that. But one of the things that I like to do is express gratitude for people that have really made an effort to help me throughout my life. And high school sports, for those people that haven't experienced high school sports like Tim and I have, I wrote my high school football coach, Mitch Sutterfield, who also was the varsity wrestling coach,
nice.
and he's a local leader here. He worked here in my hometown, both as a teacher, a school board member, and then obviously coaching athletics. And I wrote him a letter, and I said, you have no idea how much um, your leadership, and then how much not only the coaching staff, that was critical to me as a young man, but just the team that he
Mhm.
built, especially the wrestling team. We were just so tight knit. Those guys were, my brothers.
Yeah,
And I still feel that way. Whenever we see each other, we're like, oh my God, we give each other a big hug. We're so excited to see each other or communicate with each other. It's this bond that's like this lifelong bond that is really,
absolutely.
really difficult to describe.
No, I absolutely have the same thing. I grew up in just outside of Columbus, Ohio, and have lived in Denver going on 8 years now. Um, and there's people that I haven't seen for. I graduated almost 20 years ago now. There's people that I haven't seen probably in that whole time. That if I passed them on the street, it would be like nothing had changed. Or
So
it
cool.
was 20 years ago, and I think there's a lot you can take from that, and sort of analyzing that. And I'm not saying that the workplace is ever going to be like that, but what are sort of those those tenets or those fundamental principles that that allow that kind of bond where you haven't seen someone in 15 years, but you have such a tight such a tight relationship that 15 years later it's not weird or awkward at all. It's pretty
No.
incredible.
Oh, I just got chills just thinking about it. The way you described
Yeah,
that, I literally got chills thinking about, I can remember vividly, the football drills, the two-a-days, just you
yeah,
couldn't get enough Gatorade down in the middle of the summer, August heat.
yeah,
The wrestling practices, just, drilling the same, wrestling move over and over and over again.
yeah.
I don't know if it's like not only the shared suffering, but the shared goal of winning.
Absolutely,
I think there's a lot of tenets that can be translated to the business world. I guess
absolutely.
you mentioned being a part of a high performing team. One of the things I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, because I
Yeah,
saw you do this firsthand. So this is not like me. This is not conceptual. This I saw you do this is
yeah,
recruiting good leaders. So good leaders, that's
yeah,
one very, very difficult skill to find. And this is in the form of engineering directors, VPs, and those sorts. But not only
yeah.
that, but good leaders with highly technical backgrounds. That seems like those two skill sets married together is unbelievably hard to find
It
in
is.
this environment.
Yeah, it
So,
absolutely is, and um, I don't know that there's a science to it. That was when I was at was charged with bringing on people who were building products that were changing the world.
yep,
Billions of users, and that was really sort of
billions,
the billions. Yeah,
billions.
with
Okay.
between the family of apps. They're touching over 3 billion people around the planet. They're building
Oh,
that
wow.
technology, and they're leading the teams that are building that technology. And um, what was interesting about my time at was that was the first place I worked where I had seen sort of the decision made on offer or no offer based on the level of this person's empathy, and really, really narrowing in on that. Yeah, they could code 10x all day long, and yeah, they could build architectures and this, that, and the other. Um, but if they didn't have the empathy necessary to lead people, it didn't matter. And that was really eye opening to me because really throughout my career it was, yeah, they seem like a good culture fit. They passed our technical exams or interviews with flying colors. Let's hire them. Well, what makes a really good leader is having that empathy and understanding what it's like to work, for a great leader, what it's like to work for a poor leader. And that, like I said, that was incredibly eye opening to me. So, um, like I mentioned earlier, you can put in a LinkedIn or a Google search or whatever tool you want to use to try to find people and get the results that you're looking for, but it's really digging deep, layer by layer, to find that alignment that we've talked about, and having sort of those emotional or soft skills, emotional intelligence uh, to lead and to grow people, and seeing a company uh, really have a keen focus on that, and not just talking about it, but making decisions based on sort of those tertiary things. Um, sort of changed my perspective forever in hiring.
That's so cool. I mean, those are lessons that are going to stay with you for the rest of your career, rest of your life.
Absolutely.
That resonates what you just said. I want to read you a quote if you don't mind.
Sure.
And I want to get your take on this quote. So this is something that there's this guy I follow on LinkedIn because my goal is to really take a lot of the lessons learned from the high tech industry and apply it to my career, because I think
Hmm.
like you're describing the high tech, the SaaS industry, the social, like companies with large reach, like you're
Yeah.
describing, they're the best at sales. There's a reason, why they're so good at sales and growing their business. And so I think I try to take that kind of the best in class techniques that work for them and then apply them
Hmm.
to the aerospace and defense market, which it's not as common to see those types of skill sets and that kind of velocity. So this is Jason Lemkin. I follow him on LinkedIn. He's a
Mhm.
SaaS founder, and he said this: a great VP. This is basically what happens when you hire this type of person. So if you hire a
Sure.
great VP, velocity increases in their area. A good VP, velocity stays constant in their area, which he said
Mhm.
is still hard. A mediocre VP, velocity declines. A bad VP, velocity falls off a cliff within a quarter. And velocity can probably mean a lot of things to a lot of people,
Sure.
but could you tell me how that quote makes you feel, and then how a
Yeah.
great leader can impact an organization like that, or a functional group like that?
Yeah. I hadn't heard that before, so thank you for sharing that. To me, that speaks to alignment and pulling in the same direction. When everyone is uh, aligned with the mission of the company, the team, the project, whatever the case may be. Um, when there's that alignment, think of you're playing tug of war. And everybody's pulling at the same time. At the there's a rhythm, there's a cadence. They're all pulling in the same direction. Um, to me, sort of using velocity as the metaphor here.
Yeah.
I think when you're pulling in direction, there's alignment, there's belief. Um, Being able to create not only increase that velocity, but create that alignment, and create sort of that shared mission or those shared goals. I think that's when you see the increase in velocity. And I think of it, as sort of if you picture in your mind sort of a straight line going in the same direction, increasing the velocity. As you have that, if you don't have that alignment, it starts to flare out. What happens when you're on a plane and the flare, or the wings flare out, you slow down, right?
Yep.
So there's that alignment, that allows you to increase or maintain, whatever it is you're trying to do. That alignment facilitates that increase in velocity.
No, I think you're spot on, and I've seen leaders like this at work where they almost make it look effortless. I've been really fortunate to work under some leaders that are just like
Yeah,
they get the empathy piece. That's what differentiates them. And I didn't think about this before you mentioned it, but they really truly understand what motivates people. That they get that
yeah,
in spades, but they really understand. They can really put themselves in other people's shoes, and there's two components to that. So it's mentoring people and then growing their career so that they're successful. Yeah, that obviously is very motivating for people. But also being able to understand how that leader's words make the other person feel. And I
yeah,
think that's often lost. I mean, like you said, you can find someone with the relevant skill set in these highly technical fields, um, but I guess empathy is a critical part of leadership that I oftentimes don't think about. And I guess the other thing too, there's this other quote that I like to talk about too. It's charisma, and this is the way I've heard it best succinctly defined is charisma is the ability to project confidence and love at the same time. So
interesting.
it's yeah, confidence and love, and the way I view that in business is like confidence. You give someone like, this is our mission, and they're
Yeah,
they're confident in the mission, like a shared mission, like you stated. And love, I think, ties so closely with empathy. Being able to understand someone on a deep level, and to really, I don't know what that means as far as actively listening to them, being able to put yourself in their shoes. There's so many definitions and critical components of empathy, but I like that quote. I like to share that quote with people. Is
yeah.
charisma is love and confidence at the same time, and I've seen great leaders do that so well. I don't know.
That's funny because I've not heard that, and I think when you think confidence, love is not a word you would naturally pair with that. But
Nope.
not that they're opposing ideas or opposing emotions, but they're not inherently tied together. So that's an interesting, and I agree with it, but I haven't heard it phrased that way. But that's interesting.
Yeah, I had a company commander that I worked under in the army who was just like this. He just was, extremely confident, and rightfully so. I mean, his abilities were phenomenal. His leadership abilities, He knew all the technical um, minutia about, which was critical to what we were doing, operating some complex equipment. He knew how to use all the equipment. He was, very well spoken. His tactical communications were awesome. He had charisma. Um, and and the thing that was kind of like the je ne sais pas, like the what's the underlying theme? Why do the guys just love him? Like
Yeah,
everyone loved him. Like we would do anything for this guy, and it was love. It was empathy and love that was kind of shining through. Not in a not in a blatant way. He would never tell us he loved us, but he would
sure.
show it through his actions. The way that he cared about soldiers and the people under him was so clear and evident. And then, not only the soldiers that were directly on the receiving end of it, um, but they started talking. Like in an organization, people talk to each other. And of course, like you're going to get a reputation for being someone that can be trusted. And yeah, he made it look effortless. Yeah, it was really
Yeah,
cool.
that's awesome.
Um, yeah, I didn't really expect us to get into this deep into leadership, but it's really cool hearing your perspective. So I wanted to dive into it.
Yeah,
You know,
glad we did.
one of the things that we had spoken about before, I
Hmm.
think you covered a lot of the intangibles that are not, computers, machine learning algorithms, AI tools are not going to be able to sift through. There's a human touch that is going to be so critical for a recruiter in this day and age to be able to filter out the people that might not be a cultural fit, and then actively seek out the candidates for these
Yeah,
highly specialized roles that will be a cultural fit. Um, what skill sets, either in engineering, technology, computer science, any sort of field, what skill sets do you think of that are going to be so relevant in the near future? Maybe they're already relevant,
yeah.
but even more relevant 5, 10, 15 years from now. Like what skill sets are going to be needed to grow the type of technologies that are going to exist 20 years from now?
Yeah, when you first reached out to me and talked to me about potentially doing this podcast, this was one of the questions or the ideas that really sort of stuck with me, or I spent the most time thinking about. And so I have some friends that are in academia, and I went to them and sort of asked them, what are the skills that the university or the college you work at, what are they focusing on for the future? And did some independent research, really spent a lot of time thinking about this. Um, and I don't know that they're going to drastically the kind of the core tools in engineering and skill sets. I don't think that they're going to change tremendously over the next 5 or 10 years. What I think is going to be as important or more important, I guess increasingly important, is sort of that technical literacy or that information literacy. So these tools, whether it be AI, machine learning, whatever the case may be, they're only going to become more and more powerful and more useful, and frankly, better tools. But the ability to manage those tools or understand sort of the deeper understanding is going to be, incredibly important. And that's something, I think if you talk to people, who are fresh out of college, maybe a year or two, uh, or up to 10 years, if you ask them what they learn in college, if they weren't to going to school to be a doctor or a lawyer, what did you learn? Sort of what outside of what your major was, what did you learn in college? And I think a lot of people would say it was the ability to think critically, or the ability to solve problems. And I think the ability to or the sort of the intent or focus to make that more and more a part of our lives is going to be more and more important, as this technology becomes more powerful and can do things for us. So, when I was thinking about this the other night, thinking about our upcoming conversation the other night, I thought back to uh, when I first got at the internet in my house. If I could go back and talk to that person about um, I could go back and talk to myself about, what would you tell yourself 20 years ago when you were first discovering the internet? And
Oh my
what's
gosh.
important to know now that we have, 20, 25 years of experience in dealing with these tools, I don't think it's that different from sort of the evolution or introduction of AI into our lives. As I sort of mentioned to you before we started, I look at the growth and evolution of AI and machine learning on the same scale as the invention of the internet or the invention of electricity. So I think back to, I was alive, I was cognizant. I wasn't very smart yet, but when the internet, came around, what do I wish I knew back then, and how can I apply that to AI and machine learning now? Since that is almost unquestionably going to be an exponential part of our lives. And as I spent time thinking about that, it was sort of that information or technological literacy and the ability to understand this tool and how to use it. I think is going to be the most important thing that future generations and even current generations need to learn and develop. Because doctors aren't going away, engineers aren't going away. The people that build these tools, obviously, that's going to be continue to grow and be an important part of the workforce and our society going forward. I don't see a paradigm shift and in creating sort of these jobs we've never heard of. What I see is the importance of this is only going to continue to grow. We don't know what it's going to look like, so we really need to have that technological literacy um, to be able to understand what we should do, what we shouldn't do, how it works, all of those things. So that's really sort of what struck me when I first started thinking about all this.
So, what you just said, you pretty much summed up like the whole theme of this podcast, which is really cool. There's been really few people who've really understood what I'm doing. Yeah, they
Yeah,
see like they say human machine interface. That's the theme of the podcast, human machine interface, and then really how humans can leverage machines, whether it be a software tool or a manufacturing equipment, aircraft, spacecraft, ground vehicles, submersibles. How can we use machines to leverage human abilities? And I think you are the first person, like one of the few people that when I told about the podcast, you understood it. I was like, oh,
yeah,
okay, this guy gets it. I think you and like two other people that I talked to when it's still early on, but I was like,
yeah,
okay, Tim understands the theme because in the future there'll be all these AI tools, and I totally agree with you. I think this is akin to the invention of electricity or the internet. And if I close my eyes and think about loading that CD-ROM, that AOL free CD-ROM that you got at
that you
Blockbuster
got in the mail.
or in the mail, they were
Yeah,
sending
we
them
got
out to
a
everyone.
yeah,
I mean, I close my eyes, I can picture that piece of cardboard in my hand, and I load it into the uh the CD-ROM drive, and
yep,
then then you have the Ethernet plug-in. We only had one phone line, so we had to unplug our phone.
oh yeah,
A lot of the kids of the new generation won't remember any of this stuff because they weren't alive. But and then so you unplug your phone, plug the Ethernet cable in, load the software, and then you saw a key. It was just a golden key, like an
yep,
old school key with, very, very large faces, and then a lightning bolt or some sort of electrical signal, and then this crazy like digital sound.
yeah.
And then, you know, you've got mail. You've got mail. And
What
that
a
was
rush.
AOL. I mean, yeah, I know. Thinking about that, it seemed so impactful even when I was younger. And when my father was showing me how he checked his email,
Yeah,
I never thought it would be mainstream. I was like, oh, this is some niche technology that, he was in the business of technology. I was like, oh, this
yeah,
is only something that, technologists and high tech people are going to get. But, and a lot of people feel that way about AI. So a lot
yeah.
of people feel that this is some fringe technology that was recently developed and is only going to, be relevant at is only going to be relevant at Salesforce. It's only going to be relevant at these high tech companies, but I don't think that's the case.
I'm certain it's not going to be the case. I feel confident that this is going to be uh, a such a integral piece of our lives, and I do think it'll make our lives easier. Um, but I think it's sort of important to maintain that distance or take a step back and sort of understand, um, you know, how it works and how we should use it and how we shouldn't. And that's going to be the challenge, not only for you and I, but for the companies that are developing this. And you think back to Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park,
Oh
and
my
when he's
gosh.
talking about they never took the time to pause to think if they they should. They just I'm butchering the quote, but they basically ask themselves, can we do this, not should we do this.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and I think that's more important than ever.
No, yeah, I love that movie, by the way.
Yeah,
No, you're so right. It's and a lot of times the human mind is so focused on that velocity that we're speaking of, that moving
yeah,
forward, that developing cutting edge technologies. I love telling my kids and my nieces and nephews about how from the time the Wright brothers took flight, whatever 50 seconds or whatever it was in Kitty Hawk,
yeah,
North Carolina, on the beach of Kitty Hawk in the Outer Banks, from the time that a human first took flight on a machine, I think it was less than 45 or 50 years later, we were sending people to the moon. And
yeah,
I think, well, I feel strongly about this, that, our kids, the next generation's future, whatever it looks like, is going to be so unrecognizable to you and I in today's
absolutely.
world. So if you don't have the ability to harness these types of technologies, think critically in a way that a human only can, and leverage these technologies to really to reach your goals or reach your company's
Hmm.
goals. I think it's going to be an interesting world, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's something I've uh, thought about for most of my adult life, is how lucky we are to sort of be at the bottom of this exponential curve. If you look at sort of human history as a whole, and how we're just starting to to hit that on ramp to the the technological curve, and the developments that have taken place even over the last, I don't know, 20 years. It's pretty exciting to be, to be in early on this. And, we won't be around to see where things are at in 100 years, but it's still pretty cool to be on the sort of the front end of this, or the tip of the spear, if you will.
I am honestly excited about it, and I've never been in a point in my adult or even my adult life or my childhood life, where I've been more excited about the future than I am right now at this very
Yeah,
moment. So hearing that you share the same viewpoint and passion is really it's really fun for me. I mean, it makes me feel
yeah,
good, because there's some people that are nervous about the future of technology, or they're nervous about the what ifs. I mean, we're going to figure out the what ifs, and I think it's so critical for us to maintain the ability to think critically so we can avoid the pitfalls, because every technology is going to have consequences. Um,
absolutely.
but yeah, I could talk to you about technology for a long time, but I wanted to be respectful of your time and allow you to
Yeah,
ask any questions of me. I've been blabbering on, asking you a lot of questions, but wanted to give you an opportunity to ask me any questions you want.
sure. I'm not sure how much you want to get into it, but I know you've been working on some really cool ideas, some really cool things as it relates to what we've talked about. I would kind of ask how that's going, what challenges you've seen, what um, where do you see where do you see your individual? I don't know, not sure how much you want to talk about it, but sort
Yeah,
of
I'll talk about it. Yeah.
what's your experience been like with that?
Yeah. So I haven't really opened up to many people about this, except for maybe my wife and a few close friends. But I do want to talk about this. Yeah, this is a good opportunity to mention it. So one of the things that is kind of related to this media project I've been working on, Tech 45, which you're so graciously allowing me to interview you for, which has been fun, by the way.
Yeah, it
Um,
has.
so really, one of the things I've been tinkering with is how can I use multimedia and technology to have a greater reach? And what I mean
Sure.
by greater reach is, I want to reach the people that are in my network that I already know and that I'm friends with on social media, on LinkedIn, my family that I can share pictures or videos with. But I would love to start growing that network of people, and learning from experts in the field like yourself, not only for my own personal development, but I'd love to be able to have this network of people that I can tap into, that you and I can tap into. If there's something that we want to build, if there's a new tool in our business that we need to accomplish XYZ, I want to be able to have this network of people that are available to us and that would, hopefully like to collaborate with us,
Yeah,
to build the technologies of the future that you're describing. And I guess there's another, underlying theme too. I'd failed to mention this to you earlier, but one of my top priorities in life, one of the core missions that I hold dear in life is helping other, veterans, and law enforcement officers that are transitioning out of law enforcement find their new mission in life. And it's not something I've
Yeah.
talked about really openly before this, but I'm glad you asked about it, because I want to have a platform to reach veterans and law enforcement officers that are often struggling to find their new mission in life, just like I did when I was describing that, going to like a all-star sales team after I got out of the army. I struggled through it. I had this mission in the army that I was so clearly a part of something greater than myself. We were all wearing the same uniform, the same American
Hmm.
flag on our right shoulder, and it was so clear. Same with the football team, the wrestling team. Like, it was so clear what your mission was when you all put on the
Yeah.
same uniform. You're part of something, and when that's ripped away from you, when you transition out of the military, you feel lost. A lot of us feel lost.
Sure.
And so I want to use any ability I have, and I can only call so many people in my network and check on them. And if I have the ability, if there's one veteran watching our video that you and I can help, find meaningful employment and a new mission in life, then this whole thing is worth it to me.
Absolutely. That's awesome.
So,
Yeah. That's cool.
but yeah, so
Uh,
it's and I want to thank you too, because you helped me, find my own mission in life. I was struggling through that sales career early on,
yeah.
and you gave me such a unique opportunity to make a drastic career change, a geographic change, which can be uncomfortable, but can also lead to
Yeah.
growth. And the job opportunity that you picked me for and that you supported me through the interview process for, it really changed the trajectory of my life forever. So I thank you
Yeah,
for that.
man. You've been a good friend, and I'm glad it worked out that way. And I've had a ton of fun doing this with you. And yeah,
Yeah.
I'd love to do it again.
Oh, I'm in. There's a lot more I'd love to talk to you about. So we'll have to do another episode or another
Great.
interview,
Uh,
whatever.
be a recurring guest.
Thank you so much, Tim. I
Cool.
greatly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this. Um, and I just love catching up with you as always. So this was awesome.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Jack.
All right. Take care, buddy.
Yep. See ya.